Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a special build. I know it's not exactly Narnia related. I mean, I guess it sort of is, but, well, I can't contain myself anymore. I just bought this. And this right here is a sword from Lord of the Rings. This is the Strider Ranger sword, one of my absolute favorite swords from the movie. This is the United Cutlery piece. This is absolutely gorgeous. It's a decorative piece, not actually made for like clanging together and everything, but it's sturdy enough to be able to carry around, swing around, you know, to play with. It's a toy. But I absolutely love this thing, and it's great. Unfortunately, though, the scabbard that United Cutlery makes is very rare anymore, and it's extremely hard to come by. Plus, I don't want to spend an extra like $150 because this was expensive enough already. It was only like $220, but still, it's expensive for me. But I decided that I'm going to make my own scabbard for this out of scratch. Now, like I said, this isn't Narnia exactly, but it is sort of related because C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were best friends. So I think I can get away with this, you know. Lord of the Rings holds a very special place in my heart. I was actually a Lord of the Rings fan long before I was a Narnia fan. So this kind of brings me back to my childhood roots. The Narnia stuff has really only been in my more recent history. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into making a scabbard for Strider's Ranger sword. So in order to actually make a scabbard, there's several ways you can go about it. One is to take basically two pieces of wood and trace out your shape of the blade on both sides, and then basically just carve out half the width of the blade, and then glue those pieces together, and then carve out your scabbard. And another way to do it is that you have two pieces of wood, but then you have like a third that you carve out that's like the thickness of the blade, and it's cut out into like the negative shape of the blade. Kind of hard to explain, but I think that way is a little bit more complicated. So I think what we'll do is we will have two pieces of wood, carve out the shape, and then glue them back together. I think that's going to be the simplest way to do that. And I think what we'll do is we're actually going to split a piece of 3/4 inch wood in half, and then carve out our shape from there. Then we'll be able to glue those halves together and then carve out a scabbard for it. So that'll be the best method of doing that. So without further ado, I guess let's get cutting. So this is actually kind of neat. I had saved this piece of wood, I think from like a trim, like on a piece of the house we replaced, something like that. But I saved this in hopes of making a scabbard with it. And I was going to, it was a different scabbard, but this was years ago and I didn't know what I was doing. And so it sat in my workshop for years until now I finally have the chance to use it, and use it for what it was originally intended, to make a scabbard. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of neat. What we'll do is that in order to save ourselves a little bit of time and headache, especially with like this chewed off bit here and such, I'm probably just gonna cut these ends off straight, so that way I can cut it easier, you know, split it down the middle easier, and probably get the rough length of it, because we're not going to need this entire thing. This blade's only 3 feet long, so I'll probably do something like 3.5 feet, something like that, just to have enough room to play with, and then trim it down as we need, so that way we're not cutting this entire length and making life complicated, which is something I found out that I love to do unintentionally. That took a while, but thankfully it went really well. So that's not a big deal. It's gonna come off anyway. Yeah. So now, literally all we have to do is trace the shape of the blade onto this and then just kind of chisel it out until we have our blade shape. So let's get started. Alright, boys and girls, we finally have a fit, and it's actually quite perfect because what happens is that when this is together, I was able to lash it together just with some old yarn I have laying around. I mean, it doesn't matter what string you use, but I was able to lash it together to get a good fit, and the fit is perfect because when the sword is in the sheath, you can actually turn the scabbard upside down and it doesn't fall out on its own, but yet it pulls in and out just fine. It doesn't take any extra force. When you pull it out though, pulling it out and putting it back in, you're going to have a hand on the scabbard, but you know, that's kind of standard anyway, so not really worried about that. But it's a good fit, so I'm not going to carve anymore on it. And actually what we're going to do right now is we're going to glue it together and then lash it with some string, and then we're going to get started on making the little utility knife that goes on the front of the scabbard. So let's get this glued and then we'll move on to the utility knife. Well, hey there boys and girls, it's your favorite part of the video, story time. So this took me several days to get done because what had happened, for some reason I'll wrap my string around this and test fit the blade, and it fit beautifully. And then I'd glue the halves together and it was just too tight. The sword wouldn't fit in. So eventually what I did, after several times, I eventually got like some big mixing stirring sticks, almost like big popsicle sticks, and split them into different parts, shaped it however I needed, and then just glued it in place in between these, and then glued the pieces together like that. And it gave enough room to where this now slides in and out just like it should. Unfortunately, it does not have enough friction to where it doesn't fall out on its own, but I'm thinking if we leather wrap it just right, it's going to provide just enough friction that it'll do just that. So hopefully that's the plan. Next, what we're going to do is get the shape of the scabbard done, and how I'm going to do that is that I'm actually going to take the blade out, and I'm just going to place it on both sides of the scabbard like this, draw out the outline of the blade, so that way I know I can kind of draw an outline of the scabbard itself, and that way I won't be grinding past, you know, any lines or grinding too far or anything. And remember, you got some room to play with because this will be leather wrapped. So, you know, I'm not too concerned about getting it perfect, but we want to get it as close as we can. And the problem is we need to get it fairly thin too, so we'll see how that goes. But the first order of business is to mark our outline and then start grinding it out. All right, well that worked out a lot better than I thought it would. So we got a pretty good shape going here. Unfortunately, I was a little bit off in my measurements, and I ground a little bit too close to the edge here, so a little bit of the blade sticking out. But once we wrap that and everything, you're never even gonna know it's there. So I think this is just about the final shape that the scabbard's going to come to. The next step is to actually finish out the little utility knife that goes on the front, and then start making a little sheath for that, and then eventually getting the leather and wrapping this up and finalizing. So it's come along together quite nicely. Alright guys, well that about does it for part 1. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, you are awesome. Don't forget to hit that like button, and if you wouldn't mind, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell for notifications when new videos are uploaded. This is going to be probably about a 3-part series. The next part, do stay tuned for that. We're going to be making the utility knife that goes on the front of the scabbard. This sword did not come with that, so we're going to have to make it ourselves, just like everything else about this scabbard. But this, as I mentioned earlier, this has been one of my favorite swords since time out of mind, and I absolutely love this thing. And the scabbard's coming along really nicely, and I think it's going to turn out quite well. So, until next time, my fellow Narnians, this has been Narnia Lore.